This is Vital Signs, a podcast on cutting-edge trends in health tech and the people shaping them. And today we have on Elliot Cohen. Elliot was the co-founder of PillPack, an online pharmacy service that sent medications to patients' homes and was ultimately acquired for around $1 billion by Amazon. He's back at it again with PillPack co-founder TJ Parker and Ashwin Muralidharan. The three of them started a company called General Medicine, which is an online healthcare store. It's a place where people can go to ask healthcare questions, as well as receive all sorts of care. The company's raised $32 million and is super exciting. Without further ado, here's Elliot.
Do you want to tell us like a little bit? You're back in building mode, which is awesome. Do you want to tell us a little bit about General Medicine? If there were any vaguer names you could have picked for the company, and healthcare.company. But just tell us a little bit about what is the company?
Yeah.
Like, why'd you decide to start it? Is there like a why now moment for like why?
Yep.
Why now? Such a VC.
I know. Ugh.
So General Medicine, our ambition is to make it delightfully simple for people to get the absolute best care in the world. And we think the key to getting the best care is you have to make it really easy for them to get access to the right next step for themselves. So sometimes it's really easy stuff. And I think actually in healthcare, we convolute the simple stuff a lot. You know, sometimes you really do know that you just need Tamiflu. You got a positive flu test at home, like you know that's the right answer. Today, there is still no really straightforward way to just go buy Tamiflu. So, you know, on one end of the spectrum, we make that really easy. You can go to generalmedicine.co and you can search directly for something like Tamiflu, and we will take you through this very structured flow that I think is actually better care than you're going to get from the average urgent care. It's been reviewed by a team of elite generalists and infectious disease docs to make sure that it really is considering all of the different scenarios when Tamiflu is appropriate or not appropriate. On the other end of the spectrum, you have folks who know something's wrong, but they don't know what. And we have a completely free triage service that's staffed by who we think are the absolute best physicians in the world. They're a mixture of generalists, so internists and emergency room doctors. And they are always available to you to ask questions of. And so if you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know what I need next, but I just know something's wrong and I want to talk to somebody right away, we try to overinvest in that triage channel because we think if we get the triage right, then it gets easier to figure out what's next in your care journey. And then we can make it a much better consumer experience because we can feed you back into the right sort of clinical pathway for you. And so that's the sort of core of what General Medicine has built to date. There are some really important sort of key things that I think are table stakes in medicine, but haven't really been done well yet. We take insurance very broadly, and we really do two things. We do run our own medical group that is there to kind of fill the gaps. So if there's no one else in your community that can take good care of you, we always have doctors standing by who can, and they probably accept your insurance. It's probably the most broadly credentialed group in the country, would be my guess. We also have a comprehensive provider directory of virtually every provider in the country, and we have data about what insurance they take, don't take, and what those prices are going to be. And so we'll automatically suck in your insurance on sign up, and we'll help you figure out what that price is going to be for you. So you can really shop for, you know, who in my community is right for me with this overlay of triage and these clinical protocols to help you figure out what type of provider is really right. And what we think this does is it really unlocks the consumer to be in charge of their own care because they now get to start in a self-directed way, actually shopping for what's right for them. And this is what we saw again and again at PillPack and then at Amazon. When you make that stuff easy, the consumer really does actually do the right stuff. Like they do all the things that they want to do. And it turns out those things are actually pretty consistent with what the rest of the healthcare system wants them to do.
One thing I'm struck by in hearing you describe it is it's obviously like a pretty broad offering to first go to market with. And there I feel like there's the classic like lean startup thing that's like, all right, start with one narrow thing, like nail the Tamiflu thing, then expand from there. When you were ideating through this, like, how did you think about, like, you know, the extent to which you wanted to go to market initially with something really broad versus, you know, nailing a few things to start?
To us, it doesn't feel broad in a certain sense. So you really what I think the missing product is in healthcare is something that helps a consumer confidently know how to get the right care. And in that vein, you just have to be able to help the person with anything because the whole point is a consumer doesn't always know. They do sometimes, but not always. Yeah. And so the second the customer has to start thinking about, is this the right place for me, then the product's not actually delivering on the core of what the
product kind of presupposes them knowing what they have.
Yeah. And so then it's just not doing what you want. Then you're the best place to shop for Tamiflu. You're not the best place to get care. Yeah. And so you have to start from a clinical perspective very, very broadly. You can be focused and specific in other ways. You know, we were we were highly focused in exactly the ways in which we provided care versus what we rely on community providers for, et cetera. So there's lots of other ways to simplify the problem. But I think you got to be really clear, what problem am I trying to solve in the first place? Just good basic blocking and tackling for any new consumer product, whether it's in healthcare or not.
And so the flow as a patient, right? Is it similar, like, hey, we're filling out some structured forms and basically then you see a provider? Is it like, hey, we have free text that you can type into and then we start triaging you? Like, what does it actually look like from patient perspective?
Both. Okay. It's exactly those two things. So you can come to us. We think, we played around a lot with different CXs for how to get into the flow. And we found that for really simple stuff, there's just no, we haven't yet at least found a faster way than giving you a structured form. The structured form actually makes it higher quality care, I think, because you get better, more clear data up front. And it's just faster. Like, I think people get through our average sort of intake form in, I think it's, obviously it depends a little bit on the condition. Different conditions are different, but I think probably the longest is like 2 minutes and 30 seconds and the shortest is 15 seconds. Like, they're just really fast.
Yeah.
And I don't think a chat with an AI agent is going to be faster than that for those use cases. I don't think talking to a human's is fast. So when you know what you want, that's going to be the fastest path. But of course, if you don't know what you want, then you want really rapid access to a much more general purpose chat-like experience. Today, that's powered by humans, but you could power that. You could power that in any number of ways in the future.
Yeah. Interesting. And you talk a little bit about like the pricing part of this for like the insurance coverage and all this. Like, I feel like that has been the struggle of every company, right? Is like, hey, how can we like feel confident about giving the prices to patients up front about this? So like, how do you actually do that?
Well, to be clear, a lot of them explicitly have been like, we're going to do things where people don't take insurance. It's easier to like, that's how we'll do price transparency.
Yeah, exactly. So like, how do you do that?
At a high level, and you asked like why now? Sure. These price transparency files are still pretty new, so that's at the core of how we're doing it. We take the price transparency files. We got to do a lot of work on them because they're not that accurate. But there's enough signal in those files and in claims data and in the I'd say the other big thing that's changed in the last kind of 5-10 years is interoperability APIs. The ability for us to pull your medical records, information about your insurance, we couldn't do nearly that much of that stuff at PillPack, and that allows us to build these more cohesive, more comprehensive experiences for you. And so they allow us to get a bunch of really detailed information about your insurance. That's one of the big places we use AI today is we actually use AI to process and structure all the data about your insurance. And then we sort of mash that up with those price transparency files and with the triage. So the triage is how we figure out, we're making a guess at what the downstream care is actually going to be. So the three problems that have existed I don't know your insurance. I don't know what it's going to, is it a copay? Is it co-insurance? Is it the full cost up to the deductible? Price transparency files, even if I knew how your plan covered a thing, I don't know what that doctor's going to charge. And then the other piece is how are they going to bill it? What CPT codes are they going to use? And so we got to make predictions in each of those areas.
So you have like, if for a given visit, you have like a pretty decent. You're basically building these like mini DRGs for a given episode.
That's exactly how we think about it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is literally an attempt to reconstruct a DRG so that a colonoscopy is really a colonoscopy, not
diagnostic or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Interesting. What kinds of like things are like patients coming to you for mostly? Is it like urgent care-ish issues? Is it the whole gamut?
Absolutely everything. I think we went into this with this really strong hypothesis. We felt like this was one of the things that was so obvious to us, but no one else agreed with us on this. We were like, consumers need help with absolutely everything. If you just put this stuff live and make it clear to the world that you exist, they will come. And yet I am still constantly surprised by the diversity that people are coming to us for and the quality of care when they get there. Like the quality they've gotten to date. It is unbelievable how many people, particularly mid 40-year-old women who have serious rheumatologic and autoimmune disorders that are abundantly clear from their lab values, have been told by many providers that it's just menopause and they should stop complaining.
Interesting.
And you're like, I mean, but you didn't do any of the workup. Like, how could you say that?
I feel like there's this whole sector of society now that increasingly just like distrusts the entire healthcare system because they feel like, God, this stuff's been out there and no one's actually doing the extra work or spending the extra time to figure this out.
They're looking at the naturopathic.
And there's the like proponents of the system that are like, God, there's so much like, BS being peddled on the like healthcare skeptic side. I feel like you're in this really interesting middle where you obviously like have tremendous respect and trust for the healthcare system, but also are finding all these things that the healthcare system isn't, uncovering. I don't even know if I have an exact question here, but I'm just curious, like, for you to riff on, like, sitting in that middle.
So this is actually how the name general medicine came about. We felt like the sort of legacy of the last 10, 15 years of digital health was frequently not taking the best care in the world and making it more accessible, but taking the sort of average or even below average care and making it more accessible. And there was this counter positioning in digital health between the digital health company and like the rest of the system. And in our own lives, we felt like, but the best doctors we know are in that system. Like, and they're amazing. Like when you get a really good doctor highly available to you, it's a magical experience. That's the experience we're trying to enable. And so it was a little bit of an homage to the general hospitals. Like all the big classic hospitals are general hospitals. Mass General Hospital, there's one in every town. And I think, but all of us really grew up in healthcare, and we have a lot of admiration for the people who are providing care in those environments. And we wanted to elevate and make that kind of care more accessible, not try to replace it in some way, shape, or form. So some of the name was sort of it was a sort of a hat tip to that. It was like a hook to that. Some of it was about being general. We wanted
you can literally do anything under that name.
Yeah. So some of it was that. Some of it was also that I really think that one thing that is fascinating about healthcare is I actually don't think that it tracks affluence as much as people think. It does at a population level. You have access to better food. You have access to exercise, time, like all kinds of other things that probably have huge impacts on your health. But, we were talking about this before the podcast, like everybody who walks into the ED at Mass General gets the same care basically. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was so fascinating. And it's been that way forever. I mean, that's been a public hospital for a very long time, since longer than the country's been a country. And I thought that was so interesting. And I think it comes from, at its root, you're trying to really provide the best care regardless of who the person is. We also wanted that to be somewhere in there. We didn't think... we don't charge a subscription fee. I'm not saying we never will, but it's not the crux of what we do. We're trying to make this deeply accessible to everybody. And we really do also think it is literally the best care in the world. It's how all of us now get our care. It wasn't on purpose.
True dog fooding.
Yeah, but it wasn't even, it really wasn't that. Like it has consistently become the simplest place for each of us to do the various things that we need done in our healthcare life.
How many B2B SaaS founders put their life on the line like this? I don't know that many.
I guess, using their own products is a bit lower stakes.
Yeah, exactly. Super interesting. And I hear you talk about this. I think one of the questions that always pops up in my head is, when people talk about provider quality, physician quality, all this kind of stuff, right? There's kind of like not really an agreed upon term that everyone has on like what is a good doctor, what is a good provider, what is a good experience, right? But you obviously want to provide the best experience for all patients. How do you think about this from maybe like the provider clinician lens of things, right? Like, are you trying to find, like, is part of the secret sauce like finding the best doctors? Is it like, hey, do we build a system that makes every doctor much better? Like where, when you think about like, I guess like the clinical part of this, like how do you think about like what delivering the best care actually looks like here?
The best care really is in our minds is the intersection of price, breadth or selection, and sort of quality and convenience. And so you have to solve for all of those because at any given moment, best has a different set of criteria. If you've got a mole and you're worried it's skin cancer, best is fastest.
Sure.
Which is actually, I think, a place that most consumers, without the right tools and advice, might actually make the wrong decision. You really think this thing's skin cancer, you're really afraid. You think, gosh, I should get to that big academic center. They're the ones, if it is cancer, they're the ones who are going to help me out. And once we do the biopsy, I'll be plugged into that system. So I should wait. But that's actually not the best care. Like waiting is the only thing you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And really any dermatologist who's a decent, credible dermatologist can do that biopsy. And so for the first step of that journey, you really want to make sure that you get that done as quickly as possible. And so I think that's what's been missing to date is no one's helping us match this notion of best to the scenario that we're in. And so that's what we're trying to do. That's what we mean when we say shop. Shopping is about helping you do that. Again, Tamiflu, fastest. Sure. It's pretty similar care from instance to instance. It's really about getting it done very quickly. In some instances, we had a patient recently who had a concerning CT scan for cancer. And they got referred to a urologist in their community. Amazing quality scores. He was in the top, decile across almost every metric. But he was awful at removing kidneys. And that's what this person needed, a partial or full nephrectomy. And so we found a different provider who didn't have the right scores for some other stuff, but had amazing scores for that. And so I think we just have many definitions of quality in the world. And this is why there's been such a confusing dialogue about it, is we're constantly talking about the absolute best. It's a weird notion. There's no absolute best in almost any other field. There's no best lawyer. It's a best lawyer for the best criminal lawyer is not the best civil attorney. No one would even dream that that's the case. But in medicine, somehow we have this idea that there are perfect doctors and not perfect doctors, just different doctors for different use cases.
I do think also that as a patient, you don't always know what is a commodity care service
100%.
thing versus I really need a good doctor here, right? If you're getting a mole removed, it's in the commodity-ish zone, right? If you're getting, a full coronary bypass, you probably need something really good in a good, setting and all that kind of stuff. So, and then there's the gray area in between, right? Where it's diagnostic, for example, an MRI read, it's actually depends a little bit, right?
Also, all these things are heavily governed by who the patient is and where they live, If you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's no big academic center near you with a really good coronary bypass person, it might be a different trade-off, and this is why we got to give these, I think we have to give these decisions to the consumer. Who are we to tell them they should get on a plane, put money aside, who are we to say the right thing to do is to get on a plane and go live somewhere else for a week or two while you get this surgery? Maybe that person wants to stay home near all their family. Yeah. I don't know. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're super excited to get on the plane. Why are we making this decision for them? This is not our body. This is not our decision to make.
Yeah. Super interesting. What do you think about, so there's now a bunch of these, I would say, consumer-oriented care delivery companies. And then there's always critics of systems like that being patients that are just coming in and knowing what they want or blah, 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 may not be doing the best thing for their own care, for example, right? I'm curious if you have thoughts on just the downsides I think a lot of people have of consumer-directed care is sometimes consumers demand things that may not be in their own best interest as well.
Consumers are very smart. We never give them enough credit in healthcare. Never. So my basic answer is if the person wants to do it, we should let them do it. I think where those things become more complicated is around who pays for it. Are we going to use society's resources to pay for it? That's a totally different dialogue. But if we're really just starting with, should we allow this person to do it? We don't apply that level of paternalism to anything else in our lives. I don't know why we would apply it to healthcare. Now, if you're going to build one of those services, I think you have an obligation to do a really good job making sure that the consumer truly understands what these results mean and what to do next with them. But the blanket, oh my God, this thing hasn't gotten the seal of approval from I don't know who, somebody. Therefore, we shouldn't let any consumer do it. That idea is crazy to me. I think everyone should have access to whatever it is that they want to have access to.
I guess the complication is, right, there's a limited amount of supply for, some of these follow-ups, right?
I think way less than people think. We wouldn't use that attitude in manufacturing, right? We would just say, well, the more we make the thing, the better we're going to be at making it. Imagine if we'd used that attitude in the 1970s for solar panels. We wouldn't have ever made any. At the time, we couldn't make any. So I actually think in some ways that probably is a counterproductive philosophy in healthcare because it reduces the degree to which we learn how to scale the things that are actually valuable. Yeah. We can debate which of these procedures, tests, et cetera, are actually valuable. That's a great debate to be having. But if the thing is super valuable, I don't think limitation of supply should ever be the rationale for not trying to make it available to as many people as possible. Because we're creative, we're good, we're smart. We'll just solve the problem. We'll figure out how to build around that.
Jacob here. Some quick context on our next section of the podcast. It's about PillPack, Elliot's first company. PillPack provided medications online delivered to people's homes direct to consumer. It was really disruptive and a different way of doing pharmacy. PillPack competed with mail-order pharmacies owned by PBMs and clashed with them over access to customers. And Elliot goes into some really interesting detail on how he responded to the threat of PBMs, as well as just running PillPack more generally.
So let's say rewind the clock back for a second. If you were to rebuild PillPack from scratch today, would things be the exact same? Or maybe what are the constraints that existed in that time that don't exist today, and vice versa?
The big one, I think, which we didn't know when we started the business, we learned about pretty quickly, but the restrictions on sort of how PBMs cover pharmacies that send prescriptions to the home, those didn't exist in long-term care, and TJ's experience in pharmacy had come out of long-term care, so we somewhat naively assumed that sending medications to people in their homes was not going to be a big issue one way or the other. And of course, it became one of the defining issues of building the business and one of the existential issues. I think that's largely gone away. It's not a super straightforward thing today, but it's not the constraint it was when we started.
Got it. And is it because the PBMs are more friendly to now sending this? Is it because people are more willing to? What's changed? I guess
it's really funny actually. So right after we got bought by Amazon, CVS started mailing to the home, which was technically I don't actually know this for a fact because I always haven't seen the contracts, but my understanding is CVS retail sending prescriptions to the home in mass was not in keeping with the contract they had with Caremark. Mm-hmm. And so they had to update the Caremark contract to make that more compliant. And I think that probably started just a longer conversation in places, in a variety of different PBMs, like, hey, come on, this rule's pretty out of date. Let's just get rid of this thing. So I don't know if it was literally that one event, but I think events like PillPack becoming part of Amazon and CVS starting to do more mail just sort of change the milieu, change the expectations.
Yeah, definitely. For those of you who don't know, a fun fact of PillPack history was you guys had this whole web page that was basically a dedicated diss track to Express Scripts at the time. And honestly, it was one of the coolest things I had seen at the time.
Where did that idea come from?
Fix Pharmacy. We'd been going back and forth with ESI for quite a few months, and they just kind of all of a sudden went dark on us. And then months later popped back up and said, yeah, no, you really are out of network. You have sort of 2 weeks. And so we spent another week or so trying to get a hold of them and trying to get a hold of someone sufficiently senior to say, I thought we were sort of working this out, what's going on here? And then it became abundantly clear that they just weren't going to engage. And so we had two options. We could let that contract go, and the upside of letting that go was probably 30-ish% of the business, so huge chunk. But, I don't know that it would have killed us in and of itself. So one theory was, pivot away from consumers, become a more B2B business, maybe maintain, 50% of the business that we've got. And if we don't pick this fight publicly, then probably the other PBMs won't figure it out all that quickly. And so we won't lose the other contracts. Or, man, we're a consumer company. We shouldn't start this business to do that. So the other option is, fight this. And since we had run out of options to resolve it sort of quietly and amicably, we did the exact polar opposite, and we made it as public a sort of venue as possible. And so we built a website. The website was called fixpharmacy.com. There's probably some mixture of TJ and Colin's idea would be my guess. And it was really built by, it was kind of me, TJ, Colin, and this guy, Matt Kaiser, was our head designer at the time. And that was kind of the crew. And so we launched the site. We emailed. It was really rewarding. It was honestly probably still the most rewarding experience in my career. We emailed all of our customers who had ESI and asked them if they, told them what was going on and asked them would they be willing to share a quote publicly. And I think something like 60% of all of them responded within 24 hours. And the quotes were not, they really weren't, this thing's awesome, please don't take it away. They were just deeply moving quotes about what this meant to them in their life. The one that TJ still teases me for, because I get kind of emotional every time I think about it, because I think it reflects my own personal life. This woman wrote in about her mother, and she said her line was something like, it lets me just be my mother's daughter for a little bit longer. And I was kind of like, oh man, yeah.
Totally.
I mean, God, that's all you can really hope for in life. When you're building something, that someone will reflect that kind of, value and emotion back to you. So that was the website, and the website was basically just full of a bunch of those quotes, and then full with an explainer video that was sort of like, here's what PBMs are, here's where they fit in the value chain, here's what's going on. And it did. It created a really big response really rapidly. Those same customers actually then went on to ESI's website and started commenting.
That's nice.
Yeah. So they had left the comment feature turned on. They didn't really, because they weren't really a consumer company. They aren't really a consumer company. They didn't have a normal consumer website. What they had though was like a white papers like research center site. So it was like
it was like some poor researcher on the other end of this.
First, they're like really amped about the view count on the white paper. They're like, oh, people are reading it. Like,
it was like white papers on like tactics to improve adherence or something like that. And then there was, I think, literally 3,000 angry.
Wow.
What the heck are you guys doing?
Oh my god, that's so funny.
So to be clear, the decision was like, at the time, you're like, we could quietly let 30% of the business go, or we can make a big stink about this so that 100% of the business realizes what's happening.
And we might lose it all. Yeah.
Wow. Big bet. Interesting.
Big bet. Yeah.
Maybe just a riff on the PBM stuff. Obviously, there's like all this new legislation and stuff coming out, trying to like clamp down on PBMs and make them work better, blah, blah, blah. Do you have any thoughts on like, if you were to try and fix the PBM mechanism, is it like we just need to nuke the entire thing and just remove PBMs completely? Or is it like, hey, maybe if we remove the rebate stuff or we remove the like owning their own pharmacies, like, I guess, like, which levers do you think like we should actually change that might actually help things?
I think this is true across all of healthcare, and you can see it in the stuff I'm working on now, and in PillPack. I think despite what all of us say, the consumer is never actually the customer for their own care. And from my perspective, almost all of the things that we don't like about healthcare are downstream of that decision. There are lots of ways to unwind that decision. Mm-hmm. One of those is get employers a lot less involved in healthcare. And it's not that there's anything wrong with employers per se, but if you just look around, there's not a lot of models in the world where the government doesn't have some role in funding healthcare. So it seems unlikely we're going to get the government totally out of funding healthcare in some way, shape, or form. Maybe they don't need to fund all of it, maybe some of it, but I doubt they're going away completely. We need doctors, we need care providers, and the patient consumer is the one that matters the most by far. I mean, they're really the only one that matters. So when you look across that ecosystem, it's like, okay, well, we don't absolutely have to have employers to run that system. So from my perspective, I think a lot of these things are, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be remove the employer's role in all of that. Why am I saying it this way? Like the PBM, sure. I haven't answered your question yet about sort of like why PBMs. Well, I think PBMs are downstream of that. So if you imagine that the main customer in healthcare is not the consumer, it's a payer, then the PBM's doing a great job. They are trying to control cost and spend for a customer that is not the consumer, but they're doing it in ways that are not aligned with what the consumer actually wants for their own body. And I think that's why we're all so frustrated about it. So to answer your question more specifically, yeah, I'm excited about anything that puts the consumer more in charge. People get hung up on rebates a lot, and the rebates, it's not whether the PBM keeps some of the rebate or not. They mostly don't anymore. The issue with the rebates is they exist in every industry. Like if you think about retail, there's end caps, there's literally things called rebates. They're just not 40 to 50% of the total price. And so in healthcare, there's such a problem because they completely change the signal about the price. Mm-hmm. Basically, none of us know what the price of individual drugs are. And for the most part, drugs don't have individual prices. And so rebates are probably the single thing you could remove that would start to improve that would make all of this feel a lot more consumer-centric. But really the fix would be replacing the PBM's role as being the primary arbiter of creating competition between drugs and replacing that with the consumer. Unless the consumer's in charge of that, it's never going to really work well.
What do you make of what Mark Cuban's doing?
He hasn't, when he originally started, the original thesis was, hey, let's go after these drugs that are particularly egregious. There are these things that have basically gone generic, biosimilar, et cetera, and the prices are still insane. The list price is like way up here, and there's this rebate, and the PBMs and pharma together are sort of keeping the biosimilar off of the formulary, and this is probably rational for those two parties because it is technically saving money across a population. But gosh, now you look at this one consumer on this high deductible plan, and they're paying $1,000 for a drug that should be $100. It's crazy. It's a great, cost plus is a great solution for that. The reason it's not a meaningful solution for anything else, though, is it doesn't actually change the underlying price of the drug, nor does it fundamentally change the way a consumer shops for the drug. And so it's not creating a new mechanism. And you can see this because he's basically recreating a formulary. He's still picking and choosing which drugs get onto it. Not a big difference between that and a PBM. Like, that's what PBM does. They're like, I like Humalog, not Novolog. That's kind of what he's doing. He's signing deals to do it. It's better because there's no rebate, so it's more it's more transparent. Maybe if he's wildly successful, it'll turn out to be really great because it'll be the mechanism that gets rid of the rebates. But I would say the most optimistic scenario is that he effectively achieves getting rid of rebates.
Before we go into what you're building now, so I want to talk a little bit about the Amazon stuff. So obviously Amazon bought PillPack. Curious, when the vision was coming together about what you guys could do together, right? Amazon plus PillPack. What was the initial vision that they were sort of talking about? How did it morph once it got into things? What do you think? Do you think it achieved what they wanted it to? And if not, what things do you think they could have done maybe differently?
I don't have the actual data anymore, but my understanding is it's the fastest growing P&L at Amazon. So I would say it definitely achieved its goals. In terms of, when we joined, we really were just thinking about pharmacy, not about healthcare writ large. And really before the acquisition ever happened, we were already all very aligned on what we wanted to do in pharmacy. I don't think we would have done the acquisition without that. We sort of saw it. We were raising money at the time, and we saw it as we can raise money and go alone. But man, the opportunity here is the pharmacy category at Amazon. If PillPack's wildly successful, that's basically what we want it to be. So we could go just do that at Amazon. We should probably do that. That seems more likely to be successful. And that's what they wanted as well. They were looking for a sort of pharmacy category within Amazon. So we were very aligned on that. Effectively what Amazon Pharmacy became, we were all very aligned on that before we got there. That's what we spent the next couple of years building. And it was certainly harder to build than I think we anticipated. But ultimately what launched was, a version. It was a minimum version of what we'd been picturing in our heads.
What were the surprising hard parts about building that?
People in healthcare love to talk about how hard HIPAA is to deal with, and at PillPack, I had always said, if it's really not that hard. You encrypt things at rest and you encrypt things in transit. Any good company should be doing that, no matter how sensitive or not sensitive the data is. Yeah, okay, there's some additional controls past that. You want to be careful about who in the company has access to what data. Yeah, okay, fine. It gets more complicated to scale. But in the scheme of things, it's not that complicated. It's not, everyone used to use it as this rationale for why no good tech company could participate in healthcare or something. And I always
hope that hasn't appeared in Out of Pocket.
that is just that's the craziest idea ever. And then I got to Amazon and I was like, this is pretty hard. The problem at Amazon is you're selling, I don't know, $500 billion going on $1 trillion worth of stuff. You legitimately don't want all that stuff to be in a system that has to be HIPAA compliant. It would deeply hinder that business. But the second you make that decision, you can't make all of the infrastructure be HIPAA compliant. So then you're forced with, you're really three options. You can make everything HIPAA compliant, unrealistic for a company like Amazon that has such a large non-healthcare business. Other end of the spectrum, you can run the pharmacy outside of Amazon. But then why be at Amazon? You're just picking up all the complexity of being part of a big company and none of the upside of being able to actually be plugged into the ecosystem. Okay, so the only consumer experience worth building, in our opinion, is an experience where you are deeply embedded. It feels like just another category. It feels like shopping for groceries, but it's pharmacy. But what comes into that? Well, I want to log in with the same account. I want my credit cards to be available. I want my address book to be available. Okay. Well, if I don't want to make the address book service HIPAA compliant, how do I ask it about your address without knowing that it's being used by the pharmacy? So what we did, I'm actually pretty proud of. I think it's got to be the most secure system on the planet. No one at Amazon knows that you are using anything in healthcare. We created this
That's cool.
reverse engineering hack basically to obfuscate everything the pharmacy is doing inside Amazon. And then, you want, I'd say the other big sticking area that's hard to solve from both a CX perspective and an engineering perspective is you really, in most of retail, you really want to share your stuff with your family. And in healthcare, you don't. Then there's great good reasons. Like you really, and you got to take these things really seriously. Like if you're going to be the first place that someone figures out that they have HIV, you can't be the reason that somebody else in their life figures that out accidentally. Everyone uses it as the canonical example, but it is because it's a really important example. And if you're going to be in healthcare, that's the kind of stuff that like it's a sacred obligation in my mind that you be really good at that. And so that was the other big area we did a lot of investment, was making sure that when you log into the pharmacy, it really is just you as an individual. None of the normal family sharing stuff applies.
It is pretty interesting to think about, because I do feel like a lot of people, especially when they look at the non-healthcare players entering healthcare, like this is a big thing that everyone says, like, oh, it's going to be great because they already have distribution or people are already using things. But it is interesting to hear the like flip side to this, which is like, well, you have distribution, you got a lot of other issues, right? Like the intent in which someone is using their.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll tell you why I left Amazon. It was June of 2020, I think. Maybe it was June 21. Maybe it was June 21. We were like 6 months into the pharmacy being launched, and we sort of like, we wanted distribution. That's the whole reason to be there. How do you get distribution in Amazon? Well, you got to be in the header. You want to be in the search results. You got to be in the email thing that shows up that's like, hey, I know you just bought toothpaste. Don't you want to buy your drugs from us? And so you got to be in all those places. And so we're going, it turns out there's about 10,000 of those. So we're going one by one and we're just like knocking them down. And I'm on the phone with the search team, and the search team, the lawyer at the search team wanted to talk about how we because of this HIP issue, we couldn't just feed what's called clickstream data, basically data about the products that you prefer back into search, because that would be a HIP issue. So what we were trying to do was come up with other semantic ways to decide when is it relevant to show you, you search for diabetes, should we show you insulin? Today you get a bunch of books about diabetes, you get like dietary stuff about diabetes, but until Amazon Pharmacy, you didn't get insulin. So should we put insulin there? So we get alignment that you should be putting those things in there when you actually type in the drug name perfectly. So you perfectly type in metformin. Metformin should be in the results. Feels like no brainer.
That must have hurt your book sales.
I know, exactly. Exactly.
It's a good point. I didn't think about that. We probably were like a real...
Note to self, don't put drug names in your book titles.
Or do, because now there's a lot more search traffic.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, maybe I should be writing it. If you give a mouse a gene therapy, you give that mouse Sovaldi.
So this poor lawyer is on the phone, and he's trying to convince me that we shouldn't include insulin's an interesting one because there's no drug called insulin, right?
Right. Yeah.
There's no Novolog or Humalog, but there's no actual drug called insulin.
But people are searching insulin.
That's right, because that's what they think they take. So we're having a debate about whether when they type in insulin, should they get the Novolog and the Humalog. And I'm not my best self. I'm losing it because I just can't understand why this is a conversation. This is clearly what the customer wants. The customer clearly wants there to be Novolog and Humalog in these search results. And by the way, this is the real power of, at a place like Amazon, having customer, the idea of working back from the customer. This is why this is so powerful, because you're on the phone and you're having this debate internally, and the debate isn't about what thing's going to make us more money or whatever. It's what's best for the customer. And I do think that is it's a simple but actually pretty novel thing that Amazon does very, very well, which is you're on the phone having the debate about, no, the thing that's best for the customer is to show them Novolog and Humalog. In the past, we didn't have these products, so that's why they weren't in the search results. So it's rational for us to put them in there. And the lawyer starts trying to explain to me how we, first of all, like, why am I having this debate with a lawyer? And two, the lawyer's trying to convince me that the person might want alternative naturopathic products. And I'm like,
oh man,
that's the thing about insulin, man. You either need it or you don't. And if you don't need it, I'm with you. Let's not sell them any insulin. But if you need insulin,
it's so funny.
You need it.
I can only imagine also doing this for like every drug class. Insulin's just one, but like,
sure is.
Do people say statin? Do they want a specific? It sounds terrible.
I get off the call and I'm like, oh man, this is so not who I want to be in life. Like, why am I so worked up over this? This is so not healthy. I got to get out of this place.
Switching gears a little bit, we were talking a little bit about like building in the era of AI today. Obviously, that's like one of probably the biggest change, I would say, maybe from PillPack to now. Like, as you've been building with sort of like as an AI native company in some capacity, it's like, one, like, what does that actually look like in practice? And then two, what has surprised you the most about like building with these tools and what you can do today, or limitations? Obviously, we only see the Twitter demos that look really nice and sleek, right? But
gosh, I haven't seen a lot of limitations. They're really magical technologies, and they just are. There's no myths and words. Like, it's magic. It's really magic. You know, I would say that in many ways, actually, it is true. PillPack was built in an era before this, so that has changed a lot. But actually, a lot of the stuff we were doing at PillPack seems like just amazing prep for what we're doing now. We didn't do this on purpose. I think this just had to do with who TJ and I were as humans. He had grown up a pharmacist. I'd grown up around healthcare, but not clinically. And I was an engineer by training. And I think it just forced this degree of integration between the clinical team and the engineering team. And we didn't think it was that special at the time, but now that I hear more companies talk about how to get their teams to talk to each other, I'm like, I think we really had something going there. Like, I think that was great. I think being good at that has gotten 100 times more important than it used to be. Very rarely is AI in this current technological incarnation able to operate on its own. There's very few tasks. One thing I really did learn in PillPack, it's really difficult to replace a human. It's really easy to replace some of the things that a human does, but to replace one is very difficult. So, replacing your doctor as an example, like we're very far away from that. Maybe that'll happen in 2 years because I'm not appreciating what the underlying model is going to do or something. But like just ignoring that for a second and looking at these models and doctors, they're really far away from each other. But they really are magic for as a wrapper around things that doctors do or different ways to engage consumers, super magical. And so if you have control over your operational flow, your consumer experience, and the software that connects those two things together, there's a lot that you can do with AI that you could never do in the past. And so that's how we're using it. We use it to help us come up with almost all of our consumer experience is sort of guided in the background, even if it doesn't look like it. It is guided in some way, shape, or form by AI. And then our doctors use it very heavily to sort of prepare for visits, host the visit itself. But in no way is it replacing them. It just makes them way more effective. They get such a good summary of who this patient is and why they're coming in. In 15, 20 minutes, they can get a lot farther than they could without these technologies. But it really is just a perfect complement. It's not really a replacement in any way, shape, or form. And then the other big place we've invested is on the follow-up. So much of medicine is like, we have this plan together. Now I got to help you do the plan. The two things you got to be good at to do that, you got to be really good at the exact underlying transaction. So I got to help you get your prescription or fill your prescription. I got to help you do your prior authorization. Like I got to be good at all those individual touch points. And then I also have to be good at stringing them together. And AI is just so good at stringing things together.
On a personal level, are there interesting AI things that you're just watching, even if it's not for the company that, I don't know, at the regulatory level?
I don't know that. Yeah, I guess I'm a little skeptical about the AI prescribing being super transformational. Maybe. I mean, I certainly think like liquidity in simple prescriptions would be really valuable for people. Like, why are we limiting people's statins, metformin,
Sure.
There have been ways to build that for a long time. No one have used. The FDA has always had this pathway for people to basically make a prescription drug OTC as long as it comes sort of with the right companion. Nobody built it. Yeah. Maybe AI makes that cheap enough to do that people start to do it. So I don't want to say it's not meaningful, but I'm not like, oh my God, that would change healthcare. I don't feel that way at all.
What's the reason you think they have not used that pathway, out of curiosity? Like if you have a generic drug or something in like a relatively competitive environment, like wouldn't that significantly lower the friction and like increase the uptake?
My guess, that's a great question. My guess is that the answer is a mixture of, there's no company that makes generics that's really a consumer company. So they're just not thinking about that. That's not how they move volume. They sell it to wholesalers and the wholesaler sells to the pharmacy. And so there just aren't people really thinking about it. And I bet those pathways the IP in those pathways isn't super defensible. So there's no incentive to go build that, to do the work, because the second you do, someone else can copy it and get it back through the FDA really fast.
Got it. So there is some like level of evidence that you have to run a trial of some kind, basically to do the IC. Okay.
This is probably why digital therapeutics don't work either, right?
Yeah.
It's all the cost of a drug and none of the defensibility.
Yeah.
Drugs only work. We only tolerate the way the FDA makes us study a drug because the drugs are they just it happens to be that patents work really well with biology because small changes to a molecule really do change what it does.
Yeah.
And you got to really redo the trial. And so there's no real advantage to the second mover.
Yeah.
They can't run a next trial on a slightly different drug for any less money than the first person did.
Yeah.
So their option is actually worse. They should wait because now the first drug is going to go generic they have less total time of real exclusivity because that first drug's going to go generic.
Yeah.
And so that's why there's no incentive for these competitors unless it's a really big space like GLP-1s, and then there's an incentive for it, and that's why we get so many GLP-1s so quickly. Hep C was another good example of that. Got a lot of good competition really quickly because the category is big enough, but we don't get that in categories that aren't that big.
Yeah. Since you brought it up, digital therapeutics, I feel like it's gone through an entire hype cycle. Nikhil definitely at CB Insights must have had some great digital therapeutics market map. But I think you identified, obviously, the hard part of it is once one person can do it, a bunch of other people can.
I would sort of zoom out and ask yourself, you're an alien that came down from, this is how I always think about regulatory stuff. It's you're an alien that came down from space.
You'd be pretty shocked by a lot of things.
This way. You'd be pretty shocked about a lot of things. But wouldn't you be a little surprised that someone's grand go-to-market strategy for a piece of software that probably took 2 engineers to build
was the FDA
was to spend $100 million to go through the FDA or $1 billion or something? You'd be like, that seems crazy, man.
Yeah.
So I think in drugs, we do it for 2 reasons. 1, we've accepted that the list price for them is going to be really high. So the payoff is there. And then 2, it's not clear they're safe. So really got to put them through some kind of trial. And the second you're going to do some kind of trial, doing a more, then the debate is is it more robust, less robust?
Sure.
But it's just not clear that a digital therapeutic is unsafe. I mean, certainly a good scientist would say, well, we really don't know, right? Maybe giving somebody advice in an app could have real harm. And there's a very good scientific point to that. But I think most of us in our lay lives just assume that an app on a phone is not going to be dangerous for us. And so therefore,
we're all allowed to use TikTok 6 hours a day.
Right. Why would you, nothing else in our life that is on our phone goes through this. So why would the 1% of apps that are going to somehow touch our healthcare life go through it? Well, so then the only reason is because you want a payer to pay for it. But so now you're picking up 2 big go-to-market complexities. You got to get through the FDA and you got to convince payers to pay for the thing.
Yeah.
I think the number of use cases where that actually makes sense is really, really, really slim. And usually the whole reason they're doing these apps is they want to reach a lot of patients. But by definition in healthcare, you can't charge a high dollar amount for a thing with a lot of patients. It doesn't work that way. Right? I mean, even GLP-1s, they're not that expensive because they are for lots of patients. Yeah. And so you're doing a lot of effort to get to a thing that doesn't have a good IP defensibility, has a really convoluted go-to-market. It's going to slow down your go-to-market. And the net result is you're going to make $100 a month, but maybe you could have just charged $50 directly to the consumer and there was some market that would have paid for it. Yeah. When you do the math that way, you're like, done a lot of work to get 20% of the market to pay me $100. I probably could have gotten 60% of the market to pay me $50 out of pocket. Yeah. Why am I doing this?
Yeah. I will say it's interesting to see the parallel universe of AI stuff basically that lives alongside this, where it's in a lot of cases, a lot of these AI diagnostic tools, for example, are non-deterministic, and also they use human in a loop to kind of maybe get around necessarily going down the software as a medical device path. And I think they, for example, have taken the opposite route where they're honestly, this is probably going to be a first mover advantage market. We basically just need to get it in there as fast as possible. We don't even really care too much about payer reimbursement or whatever it is, basically, and they just want to get it out there. So it does feel in a certain way, it's playing out very differently in the AI.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point. Yeah.
Maybe just they want to get in provider testing workflows because providers, that's so sticky. Once a provider orders one cancer test, it's that's just the one they order for
And I think they learn also then from the workflow. They get more information that improves the product and stuff, which I think one of the hard things about running a digital therapeutic trial, for example, is that actually doing updates to it is very difficult too, right? Because you are abiding by this very stringent clinical trial sort of framework. So it's also a difference in how you think the product improves. So.
I really played to your strengths, trials, and your CB Insights digital therapeutics.
Yeah. Maybe a slightly different question to riff off this though is a little bit about IP and this kind of stuff, right? Because I do feel this is sort of the topic du jour in pharma land now, especially where it's you look at the GLP-1s versus compounders as one example. You look at all these biosimilars and stuff and patent thickets and all this kind of stuff. I'm curious, since you've obviously worked much closer on the pharma side of things, what are your thoughts on how should we develop an IP system that both still encourages innovation, but also, doesn't allow for this kind of abuse essentially of the system to like create extended monopolies. Or maybe another way to think about it is like incentivizing incremental innovation, maybe that doesn't require like full-blown new monopolies, basically.
Just think about what do we want the outputs of this system to be, right? We want as many new medicines as possible, and we want as many as possible, and we're only going to spend a certain amount of money on it. So implicitly, we care a little bit about the total cost to get the medicine going,
Sure.
And then I guess you could argue like if they're more profitable, maybe more people would spend money on them. So it's not a totally zero-sum game there. I would say if you just thought about these things on the arc of 50 or 100 years, like we should be a lot more worried as a society that one medicine doesn't get invented than we should be that the medicine is inefficient. Like on the other hand, the thing I've never thought got enough conversation about in this vein, medicines, in some ways, they're the most efficient innovations, like by leaps and bounds. You think about, search at Google, like they're still monetizing the heck out of that thing. Yeah. There's no drug that has still doing that. I mean, even Humira, like it wasn't as long as the current search monopoly at Google. So, and when these things get cheap, they get really cheap, really fast. And even when they're still in their defensible period, they usually get a lot. This is, again, one of the problems with rebates. Like they usually actually get a lot cheaper than most people realize. We just don't know it. The Hep C drugs, there were a million articles about how they were $100,000 a treatment. There were no articles about the fact that 6 months later, they were $15,000 a treatment. 6 months. That's it. What other technology goes through that arc in 6 months? Like if the Tesla had gone from $100,000 to 15 in 6 months, we'd all be talking about the magic of manufacturing. Oh my God, look at these learning curves. This stuff's crazy. Like that's better than solar. That's better than batteries. That's the best learning curve, if you want to think about it that way, of virtually anything. So I would say the real risk is that we should. It's not that we shouldn't make any changes to this system, but I wish all of the debate was how to make the system produce more of those Hep C drugs, not how to make sure that we don't accidentally pay for Humira for 16 or 20 years versus 12. And that's the thing I don't love about the debate is it just inherently focuses us on the wrong problem. Like, is there an optimization that makes this a little better so Humira isn't defensible for as long, and would that be better for the world? Yeah, maybe, probably, but like, that's operating around the margins. Like that's not actually that valuable for us. What's valuable for us is that Humira got invented. Sovaldi got invented, and we should be super focused on that. So the other part of the problem that you highlighted that I don't think we talk enough about is, there's too big an incentive to do incremental things and not enough incentive to go invent the next GLP-1, Hep C drug, whatever. That's the stuff we should be asking ourselves, like what system would encourage that a bunch? And so I do worry a little bit that the recent stuff we've done will hinder that.
I guess obviously a lot of, on this consumer, healthcare front end, I feel like a lot of people clearly are using ChatGPT today as their like, front end to healthcare. I'm curious like how you think that ends.
Oh, I mean, it's magical. Like all my friends who are the best specialists in the world are like, I fed it all this stuff about me and it gave me awesome answers. No, it's already really good. I think though I don't actually think it's not a complete front door yet, at least. Today, it is really good as a co-pilot. It's really good at helping you think about what might be going on, where should I go poke deeper, what should I do next? It doesn't actually make it that much easier to go do the transaction. I was sort of joking with someone internally about this because I was using ChatGPT for something in my own healthcare life recently, and it asked me if I wanted help doing the thing. And I said yes, and it gave me a script to use to call my doctor to get them to give me a visit so I could talk about the thing in the chat window. And I was like,
it's getting too realistic.
What an indictment of our healthcare system. Now, ChatGPT's best idea here is to give me a script.
Trained on the internet, so.
Right, exactly. So I think there's a lot of, I think these things are going to be a really important tool. I think structurally they're a lot like the tool we already have. They're a lot like Dr. Google. They live in the same, step in the ecosystem. They're just so much more powerful. And so it is really magical, but I don't think it fundamentally changes that you still have to get to the right doctor at the end of the day. And you have to be able to order the labs and the imaging. And at least today, ChatGPT is not great at the details. Like it'll tell you should go get an MRI, but it wouldn't be able to help you order the correct MRI. And one of the reasons that even if you had even if the regulatory environment was different, I don't think it would fundamentally change that much. If someone's going to do a lumbar puncture on you, you want to be pretty sure that it's the right thing to do. And so you got to be really right there on the details of which version of a lumbar puncture and really right that it is the right thing to do. And it is so easy. Like the thing that I think we all miss about doctors is what they're actually exceptional at is the part that's super hard, which is they take all of this information, they synthesize it down really quickly, and they know the immediate next step. And that's not what they spend most of their time doing today. They spend most of their time trying to get a good history, trying to dig through a bunch of medical records. Yeah. Those are the things that AI is amazing at. And so I think if we can keep shrinking, the prep for that, like that Copilot could be so good at helping set up all that information, getting all that out of you as a consumer. Yeah. So when you go meet with your doctor, you have this perfect history already put together to have this conversation. So we want to make all those intersections way better. But I think we're too hung up probably at least in tech, we're too hung up on AI as a replacement for something versus like, how do we just add it into the mix as a new tool to make all of this go way better?
It's really interesting because like now all these papers are coming out about like benchmarking LLMs against doctors and all that, right? And anytime a paper comes out, you always have this camp that's like, this is like such a nice vignette. And the LLM's obviously great at that, but that's not reflective of the real world. Patients come in, they don't know what they have or can't describe it well or mess up the drug or whatever, right? And in my head, I'm always like, well, then shouldn't the goal be to like make the visit look more like the vignette, right? Where it's like they come in with more of the stuff, right?
Yes.
Like try to make it as easy for the patient as possible so they don't have to remember all those things, right? Like get their charts in one place and like answer half those questions that are like key to the next steps. I'm just like, I think it's always funny when we're just default assume like, the visit's gonna suck. So, let's figure out how LLMs get deployed in there.
Not to plug out of pocket too hard here, but we started this thing at MIT Hacking Medicine. It really had the same ambition of what you're actually doing at out of pocket. Like we were doing the student version, you were doing the real version. I think in tech, we go solve the problem that we know is a hard problem to solve. And if you don't have enough real world experience, you don't know which problems are actually meaningful problems to solve. And it takes so long to become a good doctor. I think that's why things always trail by 10 or 15 years.
Totally.
Because it's 10 or 15 years until a doctor that had seen that technology get sophisticated enough at the medicine to be able to say to somebody in tech, like, I kind of wish it just worked like this. And this is like my mobile apps all do this. So shouldn't it work this way? And we had this at PillPack a lot. People always they always came into the pharmacy and they really wanted to know what we were doing with the packets. They're like, did you guys invent these packets? Like, what did you do? Are you using much of machine vision? Like, how do you make this work? And we would show them, and the machines look awesome because they look like they're from the original Star Trek. They literally have these like big kind of red beep boops on top of them, like lights and stuff. And they're really old machines. They've been around since the 60s and 70s, but they basically work. Like there is a bunch of machine vision in there. It's a proto version of modern machine vision systems. And, they're probably like 85% accurate, which by any normal judgment wouldn't be nearly good enough. You'd want it to be 98, 99%, whatever. But at the end of the day, you still have a pharmacist in there. They're checking everything. So if you cut the pharmacist's job from checking 100% of things to checking 15% of things, could you get it down to checking 1 or 2% of things? Yeah, for sure. But you've already cut that 85%. Like you've mostly solved the problem. Yeah. That's the problem that really mattered. And so we spent all of our energy trying to redesign the end-to-end workflow because the real thing that got in the way of you getting your medications, it was all the coordination. It was like, well, your PBM or your payer says it's 5 days too early to fill the med. So I guess we could wait 5 days. But actually, this med's only $10. Do you just want to pay 10? And your PBM's going to charge you 12, by the way. Do you want to pay 10 instead? Yeah. Patient's like, wait a second, I'm going to save $2 and I get it today instead of in 5 days. This is awesome. All day long. So you end up sending all your, I think the right problem to solve there is that. And I think this is exactly where we're starting to already approach in AI, even though it's so new. Would it be magical if these things were even more accurate? Yeah, for sure. But the thing that we haven't done yet is wove them into clinical care en masse. We haven't done a good job taking a patient history using them. Like there's a bunch of these steps that there are people building individual components of, but very little of it has really been glued together. And obviously this is a lot of what we're doing at General Medicine. I'm also just personally a lot more excited about the opportunity for that to add value, to string these things together, than to take some very specific diagnostic test case and say, oh my God, it was 96% accurate and the average doctor is 50. Like, wow. It's like, that is awesome. We should totally do that. But also the bigger question is how to plug that into the right spot in the flow anyway.
I have one more question before the quickfire, which is there anything you took So you're obviously building a company now again. Is there anything you took from Amazon that you're bringing into the new company, just like culturally, or like how you think about building, or PillPack or whatever? Amazon is like a very distinct culture, so that's sort of why I'm asking here.
Both. We use a ton from Amazon, so we're really, really drunk the Kool-Aid on writing. I really love writing. We don't use any decks internally that I can think of.
Do you think that LLMs have messed up the writing?
I still think no, because I think written word forces you to think through a problem, even when the AI writes it. I think when someone reads it, like they just think through the details more deeply than they do in a deck. And it's hard to appreciate how different that is till you do it a bunch of times. But you start writing it and you're like, it's really hard to write this sentence because it doesn't make sense. And the deck was super easy to build. And you're like, oh yeah, because I didn't actually think about this. I wasn't forced to, So we use a lot of writing in our culture.
You can just check if it says delve like 20 times.
Yeah, exactly. Does it have the M dash? Look at here.
I would say we used a lot of data at PillPack, but we are maniacal about operationalizing and instituting the operations around us and tracking it much more obsessively because of Amazon. So we also got that. Amazon has this weekly business review, WBR, and it's just this massive metric sheet. The ideal version of it is no one preps for it. It's an automated sheet. It just gets produced once a week. And so because the automated is actually a really important component of it because you have to come to the meeting without blame. And when somebody puts the metrics together, then inevitably somebody else is like, well, what does that mean? What did you do there? And it just starts feeling like it's about you, even though it's not. You're like, I'm the analyst. I just pulled this up in the database. Like, what are you talking about? But when it's just produced automatically, you all just look at it together and you're all kind of like, oh, wow, what happened there? And it just focuses you in on problems much, much, much faster. So we try to be really maniacal about those things. I would say past that, what we took from PillPack is, I always think one of the failure traps for a repeat founder is that you jump too quickly to scale. Most of the things that make you successful at a given phase. And so you want to be really good at reliving that phase. You want to go through them faster. So you don't want to wait too long to hire the exec the way you did the first time, or, you hopefully are tighter on how all that fits together. But I think you do want to kind of speed run the steps. You don't want to skip them. And so we actually spend most of our time thinking about, from an executional perspective, thinking about like, what did we do at this phase at PillPack? Like, is this still, are we overpowering this now because we know what the scaled version of this mechanism looks like, or is this the right level? And there are a couple of places we've decided to lean into that a tiny bit, but the vast majority of stuff, we really do try to be as scrappy as we were when we were 5 people at PillPack, and as scrappy when we're 10 people, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fascinating conversation. We always like to end our interviews with a quick-fire round where we stuff some like overly broad questions into the grand finale.
It's basically just more questions.
Yeah, exactly. But it feels different because it has a different name as a segment. So maybe to kick it off, what's one thing you've changed your mind on in healthcare in the last year?
I was thinking about this because I was listening to old episodes. I was like, man, they're going to ask me this question.
Someone did the research before coming on. I think that means we made it.
I think mostly, it's kind of a boring answer, but I think actually mostly my mind is just getting like made up more deeply. Like I'm even more convinced that consumers know what they need in healthcare and we should just trust them. We have the saying, opinionated, not paternalistic. We should have a strong opinion about what good care looks like. And if you ask us for our opinion, we should totally share it. But we should never be paternalistic. We should never tell you what the care is. And I think the more I see these cases at general medicine, I think the more dogmatic I get actually about that.
If you weren't doing what you're doing right now and you could like take any role in the country in healthcare, like what do you think would be most interesting to do right now?
I don't think I would do something in healthcare. I think I would ski. I think I would just ski more.
Damn, wow.
Or I would like go start a food company or something. Yeah. I thought for a while about starting an oyster farm. I don't even like oysters. I like oysters, but I don't like love them. But there's just something about the idea of growing food in the ocean. There's like an ecosystem. I like thinking about systems. It's healthcare is a complex system. That's why I like thinking about it. The oceans are complex systems, so they'd be fun to think about and like interact with in a very like tangible, visceral way.
I mean, if we'd asked you the day you were leaving Amazon, like what's the % chance you're starting a new healthcare company? Like, what would the answer be?
80, I think.
Okay, damn, so you were coming back.
I don't know. It really depended on which day you caught me on. I think there was a part of me that was like, maybe I can not do this again and be happy. So maybe on certain days I would have said like 40 or 50.
Most people say the opposite.
But I think I knew that I wasn't going to be satisfied unless I was... I'd already done enough angel investing at that point. I knew that maybe at some point in my future career, but at least at this phase of my career, I wouldn't be as satisfied as a full-time investor. I had been skiing a bunch and I love skiing, but I didn't think I could be satisfied just doing that. Like, it's fun because it is the counterpoint to working, not because it's the only thing you do. So I think I knew I was going to work, and then I really had come up with nothing else. So I think if you'd gotten me in an honest mode, I'd be like, I don't know, I don't want to do it, but I think I'm going to end up doing it again.
Other than skiing, do you go down any fun side quests in between Amazon and the new thing?
I spent a lot of time in crypto. I'm still really fascinated by crypto.
Okay.
I got really interested in, like, could we, the reason we all want employers out of healthcare is because it just creates an extra moment of churn, right? Like, you're going to churn from your employer, so you're turning off the health plan, and your employer can churn. So now you're really just not on your health plan for very long. And the most important thing in my mind to fix is consumers are in charge. The second most important thing is, and put them on the same thing for a long time.
Yeah.
Which I think those two things go hand in hand. Like, I've had my AT&T plan for a very long time.
Sure.
So if all of my healthcare choices were consumer-centric, I probably would have the same providers, the same insurance, the same whatever for much longer time periods than I do now. But the other way to do it would be to create specific financial incentives to do that. So I got really interested in, like, is there a way that crypto somehow lets us almost like buy into a community or something early in life? Almost and start to create like a thing around it. It's like instead of getting your briefcase, when you start your first job, like, your parents like
Put you in a DAO?
Yeah, basically, yeah. They put you in a DAO, and they're like, I bought you your way into the DAO. Like, it's the best one. I got it for you. Like, welcome to adulthood.
Kid, you have no college fund, but we put you in a sick DAO that they'll pay for you.
Yeah. They're gonna cover your wellness exams. If you get in a car accident, you might be in trouble, but they've got your labs covered.
So after all this exploring, like, is there a crypto use case in healthcare?
Oh, I think there's a bunch of them. Yeah, for sure. I mean, crypto is just a new way of, thinking about how to share value and trust, right? Like, it's a different way of structuring contracts. So as those primitives get better and better, I think it will replace a lot of the way we think about structuring transactions and contracts. And healthcare is a lot of transactions and a lot of contracts.
What is a PBM other than just a bunch of enforced contracts amongst a pool of people?
Yeah, this is where I think we usually... You would never think that Visa was going to replace a retailer or a PBM for that matter. So I think it could make a PBM way more effective. It might create a new wave of PBMs, like some crypto native PBM that's like takes 5 people to manage the whole thing instead of a large army. Maybe that happens. But I don't think it fundamentally, like, you need a mechanism that creates competition around drugs. That's what a PBM is doing today, and controls the other variables of spend. Utilization, pharmacy networks, et cetera. So we need replacements for those if you want there to be an alternative to a PBM. And so far, the best thing we've all come up with are what PBMs look like today.
Yeah. Well, we always like to leave our guests with the last word. So I feel like there's lots of threads people want to pull on. Where can people go to learn more about general medicine? Anywhere you want to point people. The floor is yours.
General medicine, come try it out. Let us know what you think. We're always looking for feedback. It's why we're doing this. We think we have a genuine opportunity to make healthcare work better for absolutely everybody. And so we want everyone to try it, and we want them to use it, and we want them to let us know what we think. And I think we're all pretty available. I'm on Twitter. So you can get us there. You can find me on email. It's just my first name at generalmedicine.co. Let us know.
Awesome. Well, Elliot, thanks for coming to hang out with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And being the inaugural in-person guest.
Oh, yeah. Well, this was great. I really enjoyed this.
It's great
to get to hang out with you guys in person.